He didn't tweak the system. He torched it. In a move that stunned the medical establishment, U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. fired all 17 members of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Panel, every single one of them, overnight. No warnings, no exceptions. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, known as ACIP, had shaped U.S. vaccine policy for decades. And just like that, it was gone. Supporters of Kennedy say it was a bold step toward restoring public trust. Critics? They're calling it a dangerous power grab by an anti-vaccine crusader now running the country's top health agency. But this wasn't just a reshuffle. It was a total purge, designed to uproot what Kennedy calls years of corruption, conflicts of interest, and politically motivated science. Why did he do it? According to insiders, Kennedy believed the Biden administration's final year stacked the panel with loyalists to lock in their vaccine agenda through 2028. And if he hadn't acted fast, they would have kept control of federal immunization policy long after the election was over. Veteran health expert Robert Moffat didn't mince words. It is profoundly naive to believe Biden's appointees were disinterested scientists with no financial ties to pharma. Kennedy, he says, did what any serious reformer would. He cleaned house. But this shakeup wasn't just about who sits on the panel. It was a signal, a declaration that America's vaccine policy is about to be rewritten from the ground up. Kennedy didn't just fire the old guard. He replaced them with names that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Leading the newly hand-picked panel is Dr. Martin Kulldorff, a former Harvard epidemiologist who broke ranks with mainstream COVID policies early in the pandemic. He was one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, a document that called lockdowns a catastrophic mistake. And now he's chairing the most powerful vaccine advisory group in the country. But it doesn't stop there. Among the new appointees is Dr. Robert Malone, the scientist who helped pioneer mRNA technology and then became one of its most outspoken critics. Malone has accused federal agencies of hiding risks tied to the COVID shots and has testified in lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers. Critics say this new panel is packed with skeptics who question not just COVID vaccines, but the very structure of the childhood immunization schedule. And they're not hiding it. In their first meeting, Kulldorff announced the launch of two separate work groups. One will re-examine cumulative effects of giving so many vaccines to children at once. The other? It's going back decades to reassess older vaccines that haven't been reviewed in over 7 years. Kennedy's critics were quick to pounce. The American Academy of Pediatrics released a blistering statement, saying the CDC panel is no longer a credible process, and announcing it will publish its own independent vaccine schedule moving forward. But Kennedy's allies argue this isn't some anti-vax crusade. It's a reset, a long-overdue reckoning with outdated science, financial conflicts, and the politicization of public health. And as one committee member put it, we're not here to burn down science. We're here to clean up the mess. The very first priority for Kennedy's new advisory team, a full-blown re-evaluation of the COVID-19 vaccines, especially for healthy children and pregnant women. It didn't take long for the new ACIP panel to make waves. Within days, Kennedy sidestepped the old recommendations and declared that COVID shots would no longer be advised for healthy minors or expectant mothers, a move that stunned CDC officials and vaccine experts alike. But behind the scenes, the new panel wasn't just reacting. They were digging into raw data that Kennedy and his team say has been ignored or downplayed for too long. Multiple advisors questioned whether the CDC's real-world safety data was even trustworthy. Others demanded more randomized controlled trials, especially for booster shots in younger age groups. Kennedy's FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, echoed the concern. Writing in the New England Journal of Medicine, he called for a pause on recommending boosters for people under 64, unless there's strong new evidence they're needed. Then there's the data itself, and it paints a very different picture from what most Americans heard during the pandemic. According to the CDC's own numbers, more than 2.2 million Americans died of COVID between 2020 and 2025. But among 12 to 17-year-olds, the death count was just 394. That's 0.03% of the total. For those under 12, the vast majority who died were already immunocompromised. In other words, the average healthy child, barely at risk. So the new committee is asking, why did we push a vaccine so hard for a group so minimally affected? And why were parents pressured under threat of school mandates, travel restrictions, and social exclusion? Critics say this is Kennedy rewriting history. But his team insists it's about finally facing the facts and correcting a public health overreach that shattered public trust. And the fallout is only just beginning. As the dust settled from the COVID debates, Kennedy's panel made it clear. The COVID shot was just the beginning. Within minutes of their first public meeting, the newly reshaped ACIP announced the formation of a work group to evaluate something most Americans assumed was untouchable: the entire childhood vaccine schedule. That includes the 25 shots most U.S. children receive before their second birthday. Leading the charge was Dr. Martin Kulldorff, a Harvard-trained epidemiologist turned CDC dissenter. He warned that too many vaccines may overwhelm children's immune systems and raised questions about the cumulative effect of vaccine ingredients. This isn't fringe talk anymore. It's federal health policy under review. The work group will now investigate how different vaccines interact with each other, whether the spacing between doses is optimal, and if the U.S. has gone too far compared to other developed nations. One target? The hepatitis B shot, which is routinely given to newborns on day 1 of life. Another? The MMRV combination, which packages protection against measles, mumps, rubella, and chickenpox in one injection. A convenience that some now believe may pose unnecessary risks. And while mainstream pediatric groups like the American Academy of Pediatrics quickly lashed out, even breaking ties with ACIP in protest, Kennedy's camp argues the data has never been fully re-examined in light of today's population health trends. Their concern isn't just about science, it's about public trust, which Kulldorff says was shattered by inflated promises during the COVID crisis. He's betting that reopening old questions might be the only way to restore confidence in government health recommendations. But the next battle is brewing, and it's not just about medicine. It's about money. While the headlines focus on vaccine safety, Kennedy is zeroing in on something far more systemic and far more uncomfortable for Washington insiders: conflict of interest corruption. For years, critics have claimed that CDC advisory panels, especially ACIP, were being influenced by experts with hidden ties to Big Pharma. But few expected what Kennedy would uncover. According to an old but damning congressional report from June 2000, the CDC routinely granted conflict of interest waivers to every single member of its vaccine advisory committees. Many didn't even submit full financial disclosures, and shockingly, they weren't required to finish them. That means some of the very people recommending shots for your kids might have had financial stakes in the companies making them. Kennedy called this practice a profound betrayal of public trust and promised to launch an intense review of the entire CDC ethics framework, not just for ACIP, but across every agency that approves drugs, devices, and vaccines. And here's where it gets even more explosive. Several of Kennedy's new ACIP appointees, including Dr. Robert Malone, the co-inventor of mRNA vaccine technology, have openly testified in lawsuits against major vaccine manufacturers, including Merck. Yet when pressed about potential conflicts, Malone said he went through 3 months of vetting by HHS and CDC ethics teams, and they found no violations. So now, for the first time in decades, the CDC's new vaccine advisors are not just outside the establishment, they're prepared to investigate it. This has already rattled some of the old guard. Multiple longtime CDC vaccine scientists have either resigned or been reassigned, and the agency is suddenly backpedaling, quietly removing pro-vaccine reports from its own website ahead of controversial votes. But Kennedy's not backing down. To him, this isn't about being anti-vaccine. It's about making sure the science is clean and the money trails are exposed. And what comes next could shake the entire pharmaceutical approval system. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s new vaccine panel isn't just focused on COVID. It's quietly preparing to reopen some of the oldest, most settled vaccine decisions in modern medicine. At the committee's first meeting, newly appointed Chair Martin Kulldorff, a former Harvard epidemiologist, announced something that sent shockwaves through the medical community: a full-scale review of the entire childhood vaccine schedule. That includes long-standing shots like hepatitis B, given at birth, the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, and even the combination vaccine for chickenpox. These aren't fringe concerns. They're core to pediatric care in the U.S. Kulldorff says the committee will evaluate what he called the cumulative effects of today's vaccine schedule. Everything from the total number of shots kids get, to the way different vaccines interact inside the body, to whether certain ingredients might accumulate over time. To some scientists, this kind of review borders on heresy. The American Academy of Pediatrics slammed the move, saying the idea that vaccine policies need fixing is a distortion, and cut ties with ACIP altogether, calling the new panel no longer a credible process. But critics say the review is long overdue. Today's kids receive up to 25 shots before the age of 2, far more than most countries and exponentially more than earlier generations. Kennedy's team believes the U.S. may have overcorrected in the name of prevention, piling on vaccines without fully evaluating long-term effects or necessity. And it's not just about the number of shots. The committee is also reviewing timing, whether certain vaccines can be spaced out or delayed, especially for kids with health complications or families with religious concerns. The goal? According to Kulldorff, it's to rebuild public trust in vaccine recommendations, not by eliminating vaccines, but by re-examining why each one is given, when, and to whom. It's a subtle but radical shift, one that's already dividing public health experts and leaving millions of parents wondering what might change next. Because if the vaccine schedule for children is now up for debate, what else is? What we're witnessing is more than just a reshuffling of a government committee. It's a fundamental challenge to decades of vaccine policy and public health orthodoxy. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s sweeping changes at the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Panel are shaking up the system that has long been seen as untouchable. The questions now being asked about vaccine safety, schedules, and conflicts of interest tap into deeper fears and hopes about trust in science and government. For millions of Americans, this marks a moment of reckoning. How do we balance the undeniable benefits of vaccines with concerns about transparency and individual choice? Whether you agree or disagree with Kennedy's approach, one thing is clear: the conversation around vaccines is changing, and it's unlikely to go back to how it was before. As the new advisory committee digs deeper, the stakes couldn't be higher. These decisions will affect millions of families, public health policies, and the future of how we approach medical science in this country. So, What comes next? Will this lead to a more open, rigorous, and trustworthy system? Or will it deepen divisions and distrust? Only time will tell. But one thing's certain, we're at a crossroads, and every American should be paying attention. Well, that's all for this video. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to Now Famous feed for more content like this. And check out our TikTok page for even more videos. Your support is appreciated as always. Thank you, and see you in the next one.